Murder? Mayhem? Mormons? Why not? You know me and my favorite subject, but let's make it a little dicier. Literally. I found another Exmo, and we are together collaborating to make Bloody Tales just for you. Blood Atonement, a new series from Unfiltered Rise and Hellfire Agency, where we take you down that murderous path. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll see you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Rise. And today I have an esteemed guest with me. I cannot say how happy I am to have him. And I have William Ramsey here. William Ramsey, thank you so much for doing my show.
Thank you. Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan, like I was saying, and I'm just happy to actually be able to talk with you. And today we're going to go down the Mormon trail, right?
Yeah. It's
So
an
to
interesting
speak.
one. Yeah. It's an amazing
It can
story.
take
Mormonism
it.
is
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
It's very strange. So you did come prepared for some slides today. So I'll add these to the stage. This is the first one you're wanting up. Yes.
Yeah. This is the one that is the cover of the new book that goes into Joseph Smith and I think his brother or his dad and Mormonism. It's called Method Infinite, Freemasonry and the Mormon Restoration from a more restoration perspective. So it's, members of the church acknowledging that Joseph Smith has this kind of heritage, this kind of ideological heritage. So, but that's not the slide. That was the cover I wanted to show you. My slides are on the next box. That's it. Okay. And my research is based upon this book. This guy got excommunicated from the Mormon church. His name was D. Michael Quinn, and he wrote Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. It's, I think, a very well-researched book, an academic book. So it's not some of the other kind of anti-Joseph Smith, anti-Mormon books kind of edge off into salaciousness to a certain extent. They have the axe to grind, or there's some other Christian denomination. But I found this to be very objective and sourced. So some of my stuff comes from there, and some of my stuff comes from online.
Awesome. Yeah, I love this book. I have this book. I think originally when he wrote it, he wasn't trying to cause any harm, any foul, and then it went down a weird turn. And like you said, excommunication was the result. So
yeah, so
he not fun for him.
Invited to be back, so it wasn't fun. Never fun. And then, he had a family just like you in the church too.
Yes.
So,
yeah, that's never fun.
Recrimination. So maybe you could go to the next slide.
Yes, of course.
And this is what I talk about all the time. This is Joseph Smith's one of his shoe stones. So there's actually a book, and there'll be a cover on one of my slides of his shoe stone. So he was definitely interested in this. And you'll see I have an affidavit of him finding a shoe stone during one of his early digs as a young teenager and keeping it. So
yes.
It's really
he kind of stole it. Yeah, he stole it from his neighbor.
Yeah, right. There was something important about the stone. And these are actually featured, I think, in one of the leading Mormon museums in Salt Lake City. So this is from Mormon history. And I'm familiar kind of with this technique because I studied Aleister Crowley, and he did the same kind of technique with a guy by the name of Sidney Rigdon. No, that was Smith. He did it with a guy by the name of I can't remember it offhand. But I think also
that's
D. And Kelly.
For sure. Yes,
Scrying,
D. Yeah. That's the one I always go back to is John D.
John D. and Kelly. So they had that same
yes.
dynamic where one of them is the scryer and the other is the scribe. And so Joseph Smith was the scryer and Rigdon was the scribe. And Victor Newberg was the guy who was the scribe for Crowley. So when I kind of saw that, and I did a lot of stuff on Crowley 10 years ago, but I think Crowley even had a kind of interest in Smith. I think he saw Smith as a semi-fellow traveler. He was, he knew the ceremonial magic aspect of Smith. I think differently than maybe somebody who comes at Smith from a standard Christian perspective. So this is the shoe stone. It's like a real part of their history, but there's so much magic, and you can go through that Quinn book and see that Smith did not come out of this like independently. He was from a magical family. His dad is a Mason, and his mom had kind of this kind of rural household magic stuff that she did. Like she was kind of like a new ager of the time, if you will. I think
She
that would
was,
be
yeah,
accurate.
she was Scottish and a healer, a well-known healer in the area, and then her father was actually the immigrant from Scotland. So doesn't surprise me one little bit with some of the stuff we end up with, right?
Right, and I
I
think
mean,
even, like, Joseph Smith acknowledged in some of his later lectures his belief in witchcraft. Like, I think in
yes.
one of the books I wrote when I died at 38, he had a remarkable life, but sometime later in his late 30s, he was talking about witches or something like that. Like, it's just an
Mhm.
acknowledgement of that kinda magic worldview, right?
Definitely.
So,
He definitely did. Are we ready
yeah,
for the
I think so.
next?
Yeah, sure. And this
There
is the
we go.
book I'm talking about. This is from Mackey, this is a famous last name in Mormonism for people who don't know. You probably know the Mackeys.
Yes,
I
definitely.
think maybe he's also famous in Masonry, but Joseph Smith Steerstone. So all these stones that he collected, it wasn't just one. So
Right.
maybe you can go to the next.
Yes, of course.
And so like this, so you can find this from church. These are church sources. And this is according to Elder Russell M. Nelson. Joseph Smith would put the seer stone into a hat and put his face into a hat, drawing it closely around his face to exclude the light. And in the darkness, the spiritual light would shine. A piece of something resembling parchment would appear, and on that appeared the writing. One character at a time would appear, and under it was the interpretation in English. Brother Joseph would read off the English to Oliver Cowdery, who was his principal scribe, and when it was written down and repeated to Brother Joseph to see if it was correct, then it would disappear, and another character with the interpretation would appear. And that's from David Whitmer, who I think was really one of the earlier converts, if I remember.
Mhm. Yes, and also, I found a sample of this because at one point they tried to have, their work authenticated with Martin Harris, which was the first guy that helped him scry after Emma, his wife, and, he had taken it in to have it authenticated as Reformed Egyptian. Have you heard this story?
Yeah, didn't you go to New York City or something to go to
Yeah.
some scholar? Yeah, tell
Yeah,
more about that.
scholar. And so I have a sample, which I'll show here later, and I compared them side by side to John Dee's Enochian alphabet, and it's remarkable. Yes.
Wow, I
I
didn't know
I
that.
actually yeah, I actually have everybody that hears my story, I kind of came to the conclusion because there's some different weird things that are occult in nature, and I didn't understand them. So as a person that doesn't understand something, I researched it, right? And it led me right to John Dee. And I was like, who's John Dee? Like, and so I started studying John Dee. And I really almost believe, well, I truly believe that he didn't get high on mushrooms. Yes, he was a charismatic. Yes, he definitely was from this family, but I think he saw something. And I think he saw the same angels that possibly John Dee and Edward Kelly saw, because it's very strange. He says he saw upwards of 24 apparitions and dead people. I mean,
Right.
it's so
So it's
many. Yeah.
it's very similar to D, like the commonalities. And I just saw something like I was researching today, and it was like the reformed language of the 32nd degree of Masonry, and it looked like the Enochian language, and I was like, God, that looks kind of like
Yes.
Enochian, but I didn't
Yes.
make that
It's
connection
so
until you said
close.
that. So
Yeah, it's so
anyway,
close. It's
so a lot
wild.
of people don't know this is like the foundation of the beginning of the Book of Mormon too, right? The Book of Mormon was
Yes.
received this way. There's correct me if I'm wrong. Is there two different origin stories? Because there's one of that he's getting like this thing. Well, because he says he
There's 4.
received it from an AO. There's four. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. See, I thought there was two, but like one is that there were golden plates and that he was allowed to get them at a certain time of his life and translate them.
Mhm.
So he would go back to the
Yes.
Hill Cumorah, right? Which is still like a pilgrimage site for Mormons or LDS people from all over the world, really, is that this is the most important event since the Christian era, right? Because it's the beginning of the restoration, right?
Yeah, they definitely hold it as holy, like, the same as Jewish people going, to their motherland with everything. Like, to go to Israel is a big deal, Jerusalem is a bit, all of this kind of Mecca thing. They do this with the Hill Cumorah. My grandma actually did that, and they make a big, huge thing of it. Like, they wanna see all the sites related to it in the home and, all that. But yeah.
Well, because that's the beginning. So, like, this is and Joseph Smith is the kind of recipient of the apostolic tradition, right? So he gets laid hands on by Peter and
Yes.
Paul, is that right? Or Jesus and
Yeah, and
Peter?
yeah, he receives the Melchizedek priest, or I think first the Aaronic, but it all comes together later. There's the Aaronic priesthood first, and then Melchizedek second. Yes, and he restored. You're right, restoration of the priesthood.
Yeah.
So they get into that for sure. Yep, all of
Yeah.
that.
Let's see. I actually can move this out.
Oh,
This
you
is
can
an
do it. Okay,
interesting. Yeah, I can do it. This is an interesting meme. It says, "I wouldn't say I've ever been a magician, but I once pulled an entire religion out of my hat."
that's so
And these are
true.
more of his seer
So
stones. Like
true.
you can just see these. These are all readily available, and they're not consistent with kind of Orthodox Christian tradition. They cannot be seen
Definitely not.
in anything, whether it's Roman Catholic, Protestant, or Orthodox, really.
Right.
And just more signs. This is from Quinn's book, like a lot of sun symbols, and even the temple, the main temple in Salt Lake City, has moon phases and things like that, which is
Yeah.
much more kind of astrological and occultic than Christian. I've never seen that in a Christian church.
Well, and they're redoing the temple right now, and I've heard, this is a rumor as of now, but I am not 100%, that they are taking those out, that they are covering them up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So,
And then this is the rumored, well, there's this theme of Jupiter that goes through Joseph Smith's life, like this Jupiter
mhm.
insignia and things like that. And we'll see more about his family too. But this was rumored to be, and I think the
Yes.
rumor was verified,
It
that
was verified. Yep,
it's
that he
verified
wore
that
it always. Yep.
he had this seal of Jupiter coin or whatever it is, this thing that he carried around. And it's consistent with, he had the specialized cane that also had the seal of Jupiter. And it looks a lot like what you see on the, and this is like a layman, or what you see on Crowley's Seal of Babylon. This X is actually the
Yes.
seal of Jupiter.
Yeah,
So it's
Jupiter
almost,
talisman. Yep, and his
yeah,
wife actually verified it was his because she wanted it back when he died. So,
that's it. So she
that's
wanted part of his possessions,
yep.
right? So it's kind
Yes.
of a, and it's not something, it's in, so for people, like you could hear this now, it was not something that he ever brought out, in my understanding, in any environment. So it wasn't like,
No.
okay, today is Sunday, the 2nd of February. I'm showing you guys my Jupiter talisman. It was like a
Right.
secret item of his own, right? So it was like one of his
Yes.
belongings, which is very telling to me.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is the cane. So this is also from Quinn's book. And it shows, this is the serpent cane on display at the LDS Museum of Church History and Art. And it has these kind of, it has the Jupiter and Saturn both rule over serpents. It's above something that has the letters J and S, Joseph Smith. And it's really wild. Like these
Yeah,
are
and the
real
head is
artifacts.
like a weird snake, yeah, like it's like a creepy
Right. And then
snake
the
on top.
family had an athame. They don't even mention it. Quinn doesn't seem to
Yes,
know the term athame, or athame, but it's a ceremonial dagger. And they all use it
yes,
in ceremonial magic. If you're a ceremonial magician, you have a cup, a wand, a dagger. I can't remember all, but you have implements that you're supposed to, like, you're supposed to make changes in the world according to your ceremonial magic. But the family had it. So he's
yes,
from
with
this
the
kind of
Mars,
like
yes, with the Mars insignia on it,
the
which is
Mars.
only used for, occult, like you were saying, occult ritual sacrifice, and the neighbors actually verified this at one of his trials, that they used that knife, to when they were on a treasure hunt, and this is great that he got, arrested, because these are not like hearsay. This is affidavits to the court from these neighbors stating that yes, they used this knife, they slit the black sheep, one of his fattest black sheep, at midnight, made a circle and used a sword to do the circle and let
What?
it
I didn't
bleed
know
all
that.
over. Yes.
I didn't
It's
know that.
so
That's in one of the early
crazy.
court records.
Yes,
Wow, that's
William,
dark.
I'll find the last name, but
Well,
yes,
look, you can
and
find it.
they
Well, you can work on it, because I do have some of those early affidavits and court records. They do
yeah,
exist.
yeah.
So, like, there's some of these early, and his from his first wife Emma Hale. Her dad was not on board with Joseph,
Oh,
so he
no,
was put stuff
definitely.
into court writing. Yeah, so he was not happy, and it shows his, I think, Joseph Smith's early manipulation of how he would get people to do things. So he would say,
Mhm.
"There's buried treasure over there, 30 miles, and we got to go check it out. It's too big for me to carry. Let's bring the horse and buggy." And then they would get there, and there wouldn't be anything there. And the guy was like, "What the heck is going on?" And it just turns out that he just wanted to go there for some. Can we just drop by? Emma and I want to talk to her or something like that. And then they would go
Right.
back. Like he would pull these stunts, and it just shows his kind of like, I think his early manipulativeness to like get what he
Definitely.
wants by his kind of fables, like his myth making and stuff. But yeah,
So
so
many of
this is
his counterparts that helped him said, even if you were to be in a room with Joseph after he did you so wrong, he would talk you out of it in 5 minutes flat, and you would be just hugging and smiling. So he was quite the charismatic.
yeah, he was a frontier kind of, to me, he was like a confidence man or a frontier type like
Hmm.
that, but he could get away with it with his charm and stuff. It's like,
Right.
yeah, it's like really something else. And this is another giveaway. They have a freaking magic pouch. Like this isn't Christian.
Yes.
So this is another thing.
Definitely not Christian.
This is all verified. Like these are full things. I would like to see that reference about the
Yes,
knife
I
and
have it.
the goat.
Find
That's
it.
really a shocker.
Yes.
I'd never heard that. But yeah, so for people who are, if they are watching this, it's the pouch accompanying the magic parchments of the Joseph Smith family. English books of
Yes.
magic instructed that magic pouchments, I think it's pouchments, be kept in a parchments be kept in a pouch of this kind. So, I mean, they have all the implements, and this is really something that I've really never talked about. This is the holiness to the Lord golden parchment of the Joseph Smith
Yes.
family, and it's just like littered with all kinds of occult symbols, right? It's just like
So much.
yeah, and he just takes it apart. Like this is where this is from. This is where this is from. And for people who've seen this, like maybe they've seen one of those two writings, but like they had it all down. It's just
Yes.
incredible. Yeah.
And one of my people that I did a collaboration on, not this particular parchment, but a different one that I'll show you. It's called the Jehovah parchment. He said that is definitely a magical symbol that we use. And he said it's for protection. A lot of times you see this for pregnant women, and it goes, I'll show you, it goes like in a spiral. But he said this is definitely an incantation, and then usually they put it over the pregnant woman's belly, and then they burn it and all this stuff. Like it's very definitely magical. Yeah,
Wow, that's amazing.
it was wild.
So like this, and I think Quinn in that book, The Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview, he kind of breaks down each one of the symbols that is found in the family parchment. So like this is one that he found. And there was a book going around very has a lot of pregnant with meaning. Is the Magus was literally the book that was kind of being
Yes.
around New York at that time. And I mean, how much Joseph and this family took from that and became kind of a American Magus, really, which I haven't seen the
Well,
name Magus
yeah,
applied to
they
Joseph
say
Smith, but it should be. Yeah.
because they say he was a dumb farm boy that never knew anything and he couldn't have possibly got his hands on it. What they failed to tell people is his brother actually did and completed 4 years at Dartmouth at the Indian College inside of Dartmouth. And his uncle was actually like a headmaster over there that was actually also over the Masonic Lodge. So, baloney. He was a sick kid, couldn't leave his bed very often. He had typhoid fever and had to heal for years and years. And so, what would you bring a kid that couldn't go outside? A book. It
Well,
only makes sense, right?
and that's why he had that cane, right? Because he had
Yes.
one of his legs didn't grow or something happened. Like he always walked with a limp. It's my understanding. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it was left over from the typhoid fever. He actually ended
Okay.
up with osteomyelitis in his bone. And they did multiple surgeries. His mother saved his leg because she said, just cut out the bad piece. And that wasn't a common thing back then, really. They used to just chop the leg off. So,
Wow. Wow.
but he was able to keep
Yeah,
it. So,
that's wild. So there you go. So like he's more connected. Where's Dartmouth is upstate New York too, right? I mean, it's not that far
yeah,
from where they were.
it's not fun at all. Yep.
Yeah. So this validates what you said. This is from excuse me, a section in the book. It says his son's widow, Emma Hale Smith Bideman, also gave a member of Bideman family various items she affirmed were sacred possessions of her martyred husband, Joseph Jr. In addition to original manuscripts of Mormon scripture, these artifacts included an intricately engraved silver piece. This object has been identified without question as a magic talisman fashioned according to instructions of an 1801 occult handbook. And I think that's the the Magus, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
So there it is. This is the up kind of close medallion with the thing. One of the interesting things about Mormonism is they had an interest in phrenology. So like they would
Yes.
publish Mormon books and also phrenology at the same time.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's
They weren't,
amazing.
they definitely were going somewhere, which is why it caught on. I
Right.
think it made sense to a lot of people in that era
At that time.
anyway.
I think so. It's just kind of an interesting kind of historical note that they kind of picked up on. But that was commonly believed as phrenology. Is that
Definitely.
and I think this is something from an article from Quinn that I got, but it's just like the books that were going around. And I think it says like Swedish mystic Swedenborg, like he was exposed to Swedenborgian ideas. And I've done a show on William Blake, who is kind of the famous poet and artist, who was also influenced by Swedenborg, who had this
Oh.
kind of very Mormon kind of outlook where there's tons of angels and planet after planet after planet and population. And in the heavens, you kind of like a Swedenborgian, like there's people in heaven, living like as families and things like that. So it's almost like Smith got influenced by Swedenborg. I believe that. And I think Swedenborg broke things up into 3 hierarchies. And I think that Joseph Smith did too, right? Terrestrial,
Yes, 3
celestial,
heavens.
3
Mhm.
heavens.
Yep.
So there's similarities in those thoughts. 3 degrees of
And
glory.
it used to be even their own planet. They'll kind of deny that now. A lot of times now they say, no, 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 we never said that. But definitely Kolob. I learned about Kolob as a kid in seminary, like your friend. And I went to 4 years of that. We learned all this stuff, and now they kind of try and MK Ultra us and go, that never happened. And
Wow.
I'm like, yes, it did. Like what?
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
Right. So like that's kind of like people have seen the similarities between Smith and Hubbard, both Maguses in my opinion, but like but I think Tegeac was Hubbard's like place where Xenu lived, and then God lives on
Right.
Kolob for people who don't know the original father. And these are some of the affidavits. I mean, it probably isn't worthwhile to read through them piece by piece, but like you said, there's court cases and affidavits of
Yes.
what Joseph Smith was doing. Dowsing, money finding, all this stuff. So he was very creative. And you can find these online. Like you can just go State of New York versus Joseph Smith, 1826 court examination. All these things like that. Like it just goes on and on.
They're
But
so
then,
interesting.
yeah, really
Yes.
interesting. But they kind of show like he's a confidence man. And then like
Yes.
the
Yep.
Magus and influencing. We may find precursors to Mormon prohibition against alcohol and caffeine in this preface to the Magus. So like he may have gotten kind of dietary things from that. Ritual magic, astrology, amulets, and talismans. So like all of these things that are kind of exposed to Joseph Smith may have seeped over into his religion that he created. Treasure digging, seer stones. And they there
Yes.
was like a thing where they did some kind of digging with a reference to it. So there's like an actual like map of how he dug for his seer stone or something like that.
Right. Yep. Yep.
So
It's
yeah, so
wild.
it gets wild. And then this is another statement. Even after the Mormon Church was organized, Smith family continued to practice magic. James Colin Brewster, who was denounced by Joseph Smith as a false prophet, related the following. And then it's a story of him, searching for money and dowsing and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see.
He wasn't very good at it because that's why they took him to court.
Right. So he wasn't
Uh,
even that successful. But like, I think there was even in one of the affidavits, like somebody came up to Smith and said, like, why are you doing this? You're not even successful. And he just
right.
flat out said him alone. He said, I do it because this is the way I make money. Like he
Right.
just admitted
Yep.
like he was a modern kind of flim flam man. And this is one of his statements. I am like a huge rough stone rolling down from a high mountain, and the only polishing I get is when some corner gets rubbed off by coming in contact with something else. So it's interesting. Like that's how he got definition of himself, is how all of his conflict. Like he was just in conflict all the time with
Oh
everybody.
yeah.
Like it's incredible. So that's basically my slides. But I think it I
Okay.
mean, there's a lot more to the story. Like his whole
Definitely.
romantic life is really interesting. How he came up.
Oh,
I
the
didn't go into
romantic life is funny.
the book of Abraham,
Yeah.
which like you
Oh,
talked about him taking some the reformed Egyptian to New York. But
yeah.
also like the
He
book of
was a
Abraham,
yeah.
like he would do, and then I think there was even a story, if I remember, where somebody brought like they were setting him up, where they brought to him a fake book of Peter and Paul, and then he like
Mhm.
came out and said, "Yes, guys, I have found the book of Peter and Paul. It's a miracle." And that he
Ah,
fell for it. Like he fell for like a con man getting conned. Have you heard that story?
oh boy. No, I had not
Oh, okay.
heard
Let me
this
see if I can
one.
find a reference to that here.
This one's a good one.
So there's all kinds of things, but then there's also stories of like people being impressed by him giving speeches and kind of his ability to lead people. So he had resources. Like he wasn't like the guys who are good at this. They can pull. They have to have some form of charisma or intelligence, right?
Right. Yes, definitely. He well, and if he had been better at it, right? We wouldn't be in the situation we are. I'm gonna go and look at this how to share this 1 second.
Okay. You can just
If
take
he
the
had
call. Let me
been
see if we can get right there.
actually great at treasure digging, I don't believe anybody would have ever come after him because it was quite the thing of the times, right? Like it wasn't that unheard of. And so for them to come at him, that's what makes me laugh because I think, okay, well, that right there is the whole problem is that people were saying, yeah, he's swindling my grandpa or he's swindling my uncle or he's taking all their money, blah blah blah, blah, whatever the case may be. Oh boy, that went weird. Well, that was not the right button. And so they would never have prosecuted him had it been that he had ever been successful, but to my knowledge, he had not. And so
Right.
it's quite interesting to me that happened. Let's see if this will pull up. Okay, can you see that all right?
I can.
All right, perfect. This is an excerpt from Lucy Mack Smith's own manuscript in her handwriting to her friend Martha Correa, image courtesy from the Church History Library. And it says, "Let not my reader suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season, that we stopped our labor and about went stopped our labor and went at trying to win the faculty of a brack, drawing circles, magic circles, or soothsaying to the neglect of all kinds of business. We never during our lives suffered one important interest to swallow up another obligation." Okay, so she's writing this. They tried to get rid of this. They did their very best at many things that way. And she's talking about Abraxas here. A lot of people miss the fact that they definitely were into not just magic, but other gods, different things like this. And I mean, it all makes sense if you go back to what we're talking about, right?
Right.
Like
Well,
this
Abrac
family was
is like the shortened version of abracadabra, right? So it's
yes,
like
and
one.
they
Yeah.
and they serve the house of Abraxas, and so the house of a
Wow.
god Abraxas. So,
That
and
is crazy.
Abraxas is a necromancer, and since he is a necromancer, we end up doing baptisms for the dead and all this other things that it makes complete sense after you know that, right? Like this is a
Right.
rendition of what they were doing. So their neighbor Willard Chase is the one that gave the account affidavit that you can look up that speaks about this and how they sacrificed with the Mars dagger a black sheep at midnight trying to find this treasure and had been drawing circles and all this stuff. So same for you. I got the same um little picture here about the Smith family magical relics. The reason why they can't get rid of the parchments, not necessarily the stones, and why I believe they brought the stones forward is because they had no choice. A private owner owns these other parchments. So these parchments here, this is the Jehovah parchment. And if you'll notice here in the corner, in the right side, that is a drawing and a call out for a specific angel. He's calling down specific angels for protection. And I've been on other podcasts with not only the OTO member, ex-member, New York Patriot, but
Nick,
as
yeah.
well, as Masons, and they both are like, this is completely like magical. This is stuff that you wouldn't just see. This one breaks up the next that's the same photo you had, the treasure bag. This one kind of breaks it up so you can see the sigils differently, like you can actually see. And holiness to the Lord is actually engraved on a lot of the temples. And so that's kind of interesting on the outside door. This one shows the meanings behind each one.
Interesting, right?
And it is, when I found it and then I went backward, like I started all this backwards because I was just trying to figure out what the heck I'd been doing, right? In the temple, because I knew as a Christian, I needed to make it right with God. And these are all just breakdowns of the same thing so that you can read it clearer, because it's so old and it's hard to see. This is the last one, but if you notice in the middle, it certainly looks like Baphomet's head in the middle. But
yeah, it does.
They lie and say that this was Hiram's. And the problem is with that story is that Hiram wasn't the treasure digger. Hiram wasn't the seer. The prophet Joseph Smith was prophesied to be a seer even at birth, because his father said he was born in a call. So he ran around town telling everyone, oh, he's going to be a seer. He's going to be a seer. And so why would Hiram care to have these things, right? He's not the one. He was off to school and learning things and doing whatever he was doing. He was also not charismatic. And from what most people say, he was kind of shy and hid behind his brother. So
and just for people who don't know, people outside of Mormonism may not know that Joseph Smith is the prophet and also a seer, and I think revelator. I mean, I think
revelator. Yes,
they call him the seer and revelator too. So it's a weird. That's not a Christian term either, by the way. So
definitely not. No,
it is curious.
So that kind of gives you a little excerpt about it, just saying that Emma did verify the talisman demonstrates Joseph's fascination with magic and the magus and all these different things that they say he absolutely never had contact with. The church denies it, like inherently. They go on and on about it. And this copy of the dagger, like we talked about, and they call it the Mars dagger because it's got these different sigil magic on it with Adonai and Scorpio. Wow. So it's so interesting to me, and that one just makes me laugh.
Right. So there it is. So they're like doing ceremonial magic or whatever.
Absolutely.
The whole
yes.
seer and scribe right there. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's not Christian, guys.
And we went through these stones, and then this is our magical underwear that most people won't talk about. But if you notice on the nipples, it's the compass and the square. And then on the umbilicus, a sideways ruler, as well as on the knee, there's a sideways ruler. And so all of my life that I was in, I wore these. This is what they look like when they were old time, like the long john underwear. And you can still buy one pieces because some people like them. Like I think my great grandpa wore one pieces till he passed away, but I had no idea about any of the symbols until after I was out, which is hilarious to me. And again, some of the things they do in the temple, not all, but some. And the top one they took out because it was so affecting their people that they didn't want to do it anymore, about slitting their throats, which New York Patriot also verified is in the OTO ceremony, as well as the one-breasted robe. You can't really tell that it is, but it is. It just blends into the white shirt. But it is indeed a one-breasted robe that we wear over our white dress or Masonic. White shirt. So you can Masonic see it apron. There.
And that's the Masonic thing. Like if you divulge your stories, that will slit your throat ear to ear. So that's Masonic as well.
Yes. Yep. And spill your bowels, and those aprons are green. It just looks black in this photo because it's dark, I guess. But that is indeed what we wear. We bring our hands to the square. This is one of the signs, seals, and tokens to get past the sentinels and angels that we have to know, or you just can't go to heaven.
It's amazing. It's totally Masonic.
It's all Masonic. And I put this on here. This is the Masonic hand grips, but I put it on here to kind of show people like this bottom one, the real grip of the lion's paw. Well, for us is called the sure sign of the nail because he just changed the names to make them sound Christian.
I
So
see.
yeah. So he
So
used the exact same, except we're short 2. I think we only do 3. So 3 or 4.
so he just
It's been a long
Christianized a
time.
lot of masonry, and your seal on the in Utah is the bees
The beehive.
hive, which is
Yes.
totally Masonic.
Totally
Yeah,
Masonic.
I mean, it
100%.
just goes on
And
and on and on. Yeah.
and then this is actually a diagram of the temple from a really old book that I found. And it actually shows the Salt Lake Temple is built in moon phases. So if you look, each pillar and point represents an astronomical view of which phase that the moon would be in and whatnot, like for November, October, September. I mean,
Wow.
it's just really
All
based on this.
astrology. Wow.
Yes. And all of the, like there's a Big Dipper on the Washington DC temple, all these things like they're hiding it. Like I've said, they're concealing some of this stuff. There used to be a straight up pentagram on the Church History Museum and they covered it over. And what the rumor is that they're covering over all of these things right now because they're redoing the Salt Lake Temple and that they're removing the Moroni's from the top as well.
Wow. Wow.
So I've heard. Yes.
Wow.
This
That's
was
incredible.
It's wild. And this was Joseph Smith's apron, verified to me from my great grandma that their aprons used to look like this for the temple as well. She's passed on. But now they look like the green aprons with the fig leaves on them. And they call it Satan's apron. And those of us that speak about it, because in the temple ceremony, he comes in and Adam is on the ground praying. And he says, God of this world, he's just praying out to them. And he shows up and says, you should cover up because God's going to know that you're naked. And so here's an apron. And so everybody in the whole ceremony room said, the guy in the front says, please stand and put on your aprons. And so we all do as Satan tells us to do. So lovely.
And he's actually the founder of the $3 bill, right?
Yes, he made his own money and he ran for president. And I actually think what got him killed was the very fact that he brought women into Masonry. That's just, they have their own factions for women, but it was not accepted at that point, especially to be divulging to women. And he made the temple ceremony for LDS people 6 weeks after he received his ceremonial rights as a Mason. And so I find that extremely interesting. Oops. One more back. Let me enlarge.
And there was like an active Masonic temple in Nauvoo or whatever the city that he set up, right? Which a lot of people don't know was at one point bigger than Chicago, if I remember correctly, in Illinois.
Yes. Yep. And it really scared them because he was bringing in so many Masons and so many people and making their own kind of lodge where the Masons for multiple counties over didn't outweigh him. And they were scared. I mean, that's kind of what the theme is there, that they thought that he would, because he had his own army. He had the Mormon militia. Like they were very concerned about this. And this is that hieroglyphic Egyptian that he says it is at the bottom. And above is a little small sample, not all, because I blew it up and it cut off the top, but of John Dee's Enochian alphabet. And I am sorry, that is the same thing.
It's wild. Yeah.
And I just don't think that anyone that dives, I really dove into D after everything. And this is the Book of Abraham also.
There's the Book of Abraham, right?
Yes. And that is quite possibly the number one thing that the church probably is upset about because they really can't get rid of it.
They can't defend it, right? They can't defend it with any scholar. Because what he said was, what he told people was, for people who don't know the story, he found he was like these old Egyptian scrolls and stuff. So he found one and he interpreted that as Abraham being sent to sacrifice or something. And then like all of the Egyptian scholars are like, this is one of the most common depictions of like funerary rites that you could ever imagine. And
Well, and I
so like
guess he
it did.
bought mummies too at that time.
That's
Like,
right. Yeah.
I guess people were just running around peddling mummies, which is
Crazy
so
stuff.
insane to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, like, okay, I get it. Like, he was just going for anything at that point to validate what he was trying to say. And even if my point possibly may be true, is that, he did see angels of the demonic sort. I feel like, you channel things, you might get an answer, right? Crowley, he channeled, he got an answer. It didn't appear as an angel. Certainly Crowley would not have accepted that, but instead the book of the law came out of that because we got AWAS, right? And AWAS told him, write this book, and the book became many religions. John Dee saw many apparitions. They wrote the books, many books, and they became many religions and movements, different things. And then on top of it, we've got Scientology, we've got Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard in the desert. What are they doing? They're messing around, channeling things. Go write a book, it becomes a religion. Muhammad and Gabriel, go write a book, it becomes a religion.
Right.
It's too coincidental. And on top of it, it's always like a Faustian bargain, because at some point the angels aren't nice anymore. And they're like, by the way, either have polygamy or swap wives, or do some other weird stuff. We won't even get
Right.
into
That's what happened.
Parsons.
That's the end of Dean Kelly too, right? And
Yes.
Joseph Smith. Like he
And
was really
Dee,
a libertine. Like I think that he was
yeah.
really a libertine. Yeah.
And Dee ended up raising Kelly's son. And so they say for the rest of his, days, they say there was a child that came out of that union and that it looked stunningly like Edward Kelly. And I just look at all of this and go, that is just too coincidental that every single time there was a payout like that, it involves some sort of sex, right? Sex magic. It doesn't matter if it's polygamy or if it's, right then and there, like swap wives or whatever. There was always a price to be paid. It never came free. And so I don't think that God works like that.
I don't think either.
I I
I've
don't
never
think
heard of
so.
anything in the Old Testament where a guy walks into a cave and Gabriel's there. That's
Right.
really great character. And we know from like the old the New Testament, the devil comes as an angel of light. So there could be,
Absolutely.
I mean, and if you go to Ephesians
Well,
6:12 and all that stuff, it's all
yeah, he even
puts
said
these
he was
things in context.
overtaken. Yeah, he was overtaken by the spirit and everything went black. His account of first seeing was that he passed out because everything went dark, not light. First it was dark. And actually the way that the plates were received by the same man, that Willard Chase, he also wrote down in his affidavit how the plates were obtained. And it's not at all the story that they told us. They told us white and delightsome, beautiful things, and like, ta-da, and here's the golden plates, and he got them from the angel, and it was beautiful. No, that wasn't how it worked. At 3:00 in the morning on the fall equinox, on that date in the middle of the night, he was with Emma, and he had to borrow a horse. This is why Chase knew about it, that was all black, and he had to dress in all black and go meet this angel to get these plates. That was the requirements of him.
Wow, I
However,
didn't know
he
that.
yes, he was supposed to bring his brother, but unfortunately his brother died. Like right after the angel was like, we need your brother to come. He's the guy too, so bring him. And so all of a sudden, right before the time that Joseph was supposed to obtain the plates and go meet with the angel again, they dug up his brother and they put in the newspaper, hey, the dad ran this newspaper clipping. You can look it up. And it says, basically, I'm going to synopsis because I can't remember the exact words. We're checking on him because we didn't dig him up, and we're making sure that no one else dug him up. We're just checking on his bones just in case you saw us. That's what happened. They
What?
pre-gamed
Oh
it.
my
Yeah.
God. I had no idea. I didn't know some of that stuff.
So
On the
it's
equinox,
so
like
funny.
that's like an
Yes.
occult marker. Like when you see
Yes.
weird dates like that, it's like something's going on. And
It's
that's
so
I
crazy.
think like the legend of Muhammad going to heaven was he went on a horse on a night ride to Jerusalem, right? So that's like
Right.
the rumor. And then the real stories, I think, from not the Sharia, it's like from the teachings, is that he was poisoned by his Jewish like household maid. And he said, why'd you do that to me? And he had killed her husband. And also, like,
You're
I think
like,
one of the
what?
interesting things about Muhammad and Gabriel is that he was so scared, like he wanted to throw himself off a cliff. Do you remember that? Like that
Yes.
was it.
Yes.
But that is not like Christian. That's not from the Old or New
No.
Testament either.
No. And so if for anyone that wants to find this article, Joseph Smith Sr. ran this Palmyra, September 25th, 1824, and it's made like to the public. This is what it says to the public. Whereas reports have been, oh man, it's hard to read because it's blurry. Put into circulation that we have had our son removed from the place of his interment and dissected, which reports every person possessed of, let's see, I can't read it because it's like kind of fuzzy, but basically they said they're going to go through and make sure that the body had not been disturbed. This method is taking place for the purpose of satisfying the minds of those who may have heard the report and informing those who have put it into circulation. So people were gossiping about this, that it is carefully requested that they would stop. So he puts this and runs it 6 times. And there's a big joke that they say, oh, well, okay, in the occult, you can take the bones to satisfy. So they always say, well, Alvin gave a hand. Alvin gave a hand in putting the Book of Mormon into circulation. Ha, ha, ha.
Wow. So Alvin was the oldest brother, right? That's the oldest
Yes.
of the Smith kids, right?
And strange enough, 9 months after this date, where he was no longer the virgin scryer because he had just married Emma, they had a baby, and that baby was extremely deformed and only lived for moments. And sure enough, they named it Alvin, which was also his father's firstborn son and Joseph's firstborn son. So very, very, very Faustian to me. It was,
Wow, that's really
yeah.
crazy. Unless we forget, when he was dying, he at Carthage. He said, "Does anybody have any mercy for the widow's son?" Right? It's a full-on Masonic,
Yes.
plea or whatever.
Yep. And they ignored it. And I think that was because they were the ones that were there to bring the punishment upon him, because he had been doing all this stuff, and they basically knew he stole the rights. And he even said, I have the true form of masonry, even clear into the 70s.
See, I didn't know
Multiple
that
presidents.
either.
Yes.
Wow.
And
That's
I
crazy.
never,
So there's like a
I never
Masonic
knew.
war element. See, I never saw that aspect of it. Because for people who don't know, he was in Carthage jail. I think that they broke down his printing press. He had printed something, and then there was an arrest because he broke down somebody's printing press. And then a whole group squad dressed all in black, like it's like really hardcore 19th century stuff,
Yes.
showed up and then took him out and shot him and his brother, like in the chest,
Yes.
like really rough. Like they made sure he was dead. So
Well,
must
and
have
he
been
had
real
a
problem.
gun, so someone snuck him a gun. But the funny thing was the whole reason why he was imprisoned was because that printing press, the guy had made a fake Book of Mormon called the Book of Pukai, like Pukei.
Oh,
And it is the funniest stuff you've ever read if you've read the Book of Mormon. If you've read the Book of Mormon and you've left, it's hilarious. If you're still an active Mormon, probably not going to like it.
So it's like a satire. They're making
It
fun of the
isn't
Book of Mormon.
satire. Yes. And so they wanted to put a stop to it, and he got his copyright laws and said, you've got to stop this. And the guy was like, I don't really care. And they were making fun of this magician, well, so-called magician. He's a doctor that had come through town. When Joseph was young, he was Joseph's mentor, and his name, funny enough, Lumen, like bringer of light, Walters. And he came from, they say, oh, he had no chance to get the book, the Magus, any of these learned books of magical. No, this guy had just come back from Europe. Yes. And he was showing him, like, if you read from a book that these people don't understand, because he was reading Agrippa to the people, and they were like, oh, look, he's magic. He knows things. Look at him read this magical book. Well, it's Emma's. Later on, it was come to find out it's Emma's cousin, his future wife's cousin. And he was ran out of town because they knew he was a swindler later. And I'm just saying, like, if you saw an up and coming star because you were one of those people as well, then you would definitely make little friends with them and try to help the kid along. right? That's the
Right, fellow
magical
travelers, right?
way.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
Joseph
And
Smith like moved from Vermont, upstate New York, kind of just bounced west all the way to LDS. So run out of
yep.
towns, beat up, a
Tarred and
tarred
feathered
and
at one
feathered.
point.
Yeah, tarred and feathered.
Yes. And
Um,
only 5 of his children lived. They had 11, but 6 died, and most of them died in infancy, which is also strange because people will say, "Well, that's a thing of the times." Well, how come his own mother had a whole bunch of children that none had ever died until they were adults? Why is that? His mom was a whole generation older. Why would that occur? The only one that I can definitely say is 100% is the twins, because that was when they tarred and feathered him and they left the door open. It was winter and they got sick. So, and they froze, and I could see it because they were probably small,
yeah,
being
that's right.
twins.
And I think like
So,
one of Joseph Smith's brothers was on board. I think Hiram, right, which is also kind of a
yeah,
Masonic name
Hiram
too.
Abiff, definite.
But
Yes.
yeah, Masonic name. But one of his brothers just hated Joseph Smith, and they're fighting. And I think the last day he was alive, like he beat the crap out of Joseph Smith
Yeah.
or something like that. You ever hear that story? Is that
I
true?
have not heard this. I
Okay,
have not heard
because
this
I heard there was
story.
like a really vicious fist fight between one of his brothers who like just like
Had enough of
wasn't
him.
on board with them. He just wasn't on board with anything. So it's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I
You
know
have
the
to look
one
it up.
brother was extremely behind him, but I hadn't heard of the other. I know that the one brother, what it was said that he was definitely probably poisoned. And
Oh
there
wow.
was no proof, but it was some chemical in his system that was
Well,
widely
the
known for
eldest,
poisoning.
yeah, the eldest
Alvin.
brother died of some kind of poisoning. Yeah, that's right.
Yep. Yep. And so that was the one that they needed and that was the one they supposedly didn't dig up, but did dig up. The best story. They're like, "Don't worry if you saw us out there." That's so pre-gaming. Like, if you seen us, we're just checking on his bones. Don't you worry.
Wow,
Kind of
that's
funny thing,
crazy.
but yeah,
Yeah,
there's so
Alvin Smith.
much,
Yeah, there's
so
so much
much.
history there. Maybe it was Samuel Smith who beat him. Like they had a fight. Uh, I have to go back and maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah,
It's been
yeah.
a while.
No, and also, many of the signs and symbols that come later are not just Masonic. Like, even they use the six-pointed star in a circle for the sign of Melchizedek now for the priesthood. And I just see all these things and all these symbols, and I'm like, okay, how is it possible that you still deny this? Like, when I was young, Masons, it wasn't a thing. Then I think it became to a point because we got the internet and it was just undeniable. So now if you put it into YouTube, Are Mormons Masons, this cute little video will come up from the church and it'll say, Are you wondering about Mormons and Mason? And they have like this little thing that says that, oh yes, it's fine, but we have the true Masonry. And Brigham Young was just a disaster after Joseph Smith died. I mean, the things that came from him were disastrous. I mean, he was so racist and just it was bad. Like, most of the really horrible quotes from the church stem from Brigham Young, and a lot of they called him Bloody Brigham for a
Right, because the
reason.
Mountain
Yeah.
Massacre, Mount Meadows Massacre. Yeah.
Yes, and they blame that on the natives, and also they would say weird things like, "We need to buy up all the native." Yeah, he said buy up all the native children, as many as we can, and put them into our schools and teach them the Book of Mormon so they can become more white and delightsome. And then there's been many prophets after that, clear in the 70s, that have said, our brother and the native Lamanites have become exceedingly more white and delightsome over the years because of the Book of Mormon. I'm like, no, it's because all their family were murdered and now they have to be with white people. Like,
Right,
come
and that's
on.
kind of like
Yeah.
the secret, the other element of Mormonism is its racism, right? Like black people
Yes.
couldn't be priesthoods, and they were considered to be cursed,
Lower.
right? Like there's all these
Yes.
kind of curses in the Book of Mormon where they get cursed with dark skin or something like that, right?
Yeah, so they're called the fence sitters. They will lie and say this story isn't true, but this was very very true and very, very taught until I'm 48 this year. So that gives people kind of a chronological timeline of when I would have learned things in primary and whatever. But they used to teach us all the time that the Black people were Black because they were the fence sitters in the war in heaven. They wouldn't choose a side. Yes. And so they were cursed with a dark skin, and not just like a tan skin. This isn't the same as, the curse of Cain, none of that. It's different. It's specific to Black people. And they would not remove it. And even Brigham Young is quoted as saying, when they asked him about the priesthood rights, because you can't go to heaven, you can't go to the celestial kingdom without your priesthood rights. And so basically they were saying these people were not going to go to the highest kingdom. And until the 60s, they kept it that way, because he even said one time when asked, I can't remove the curse because I'm not the one that put it there. So until you get the one that put it there, which was God, supposedly, I can't help you. And he's quoted with tons of things like, if you ever find your wife in bed with a Black man, run a blade through both of them so that they can end their shame, and just horrible stuff. And people will say, well, that's just how it was back then. Actually, no, Joseph Smith was quite the abolitionist. He wasn't like that whatsoever. And so, yeah, they go back and forth on this in the church. And I think it's funny, just like they do with, the revelations. Okay, well, if you're a prophet, you're never supposed to be wrong, right? You're going to get in the Bible, right? It says if a prophet's wrong, throw everything out. He should be executed. Basically, it's
That's the
all
Old
garbage.
Testament.
Yeah. And so I'm like, okay, I would bring that up to people, because even most of my life, I was always I took debate. I was always debatey. Okay. I always wanted to know these little things, and people were always annoyed with me, especially like my grandparents. And so I would say things like that, like, well, what
You're
about
thinking too
this?
much. You're
Yeah.
thinking too much, Heidi.
Or like, stop that.
I
You
mean,
just
these
go get
days,
you a nice
yeah,
husband. Yeah.
don't worry about it. Be a home, be the trad
Yes.
wife, trad Mormon wife.
Yes. And I was 17 when I got married.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's
But
great.
my husband was 25. And so
Oh,
it was
wow,
a
that's
little bit
scandalous.
scandalous. Yes. And it wasn't here. Like, my grandparents were 15 and 13 when they had their first baby. So it
Wow,
was,
that's amazing.
yeah. And we weren't polygamists, although I do have some odd polygamy accidental ties. This is a great story. So my sister married Warren Jeff's nephew. And not only is it Warren Jeff's nephew, and he's out and everything, but also he married Rulon Jeffs, which is Warren's father, his granddaughter. And so he was like double in.
Oh, wow.
And he
Rulon
helped
Jeffs was a
build.
piece of work, right? Wasn't he a piece of
Yeah,
work?
oh, all of them. Warren was
Yeah,
what far worse, but and
yeah.
he's
He
still
was
alive, running everything. Yeah, like
I
a
thought he went to
mob
jail.
boss.
I thought Warren Jeff.
He runs
Oh,
everything.
he runs it from jail.
And from prison,
Oh, wow, I didn't know
yes.
that. Okay.
And so he has ended all marriages. He doesn't want anybody getting pregnant unless he says they can get pregnant. And there's only certain men that can impregnate the women. He took away all toys and dogs from children and people. They are living in less than a real life there. It's actually really sad.
He sounds like a
And
Grinch.
so, yeah, it's weird. He's like, nobody can have fun if I'm not having fun. Right. And I'm not having fun in prison. So,
I have a
but
couple good
yeah,
Mormon stories for you whenever you're ready.
amazing. I'm ready.
Okay, I was in I had to have been 18 or 19. I was driving across country, and I had a friend of a friend who was Mormon and was at Brigham Young over the summer. So I was just like tooling around, and we were there for a night. We stayed there for a night. And while we were there, she had this other roommate. She had a couple of roommates. They were women. And so me and Mark would just be like sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden the door would knock, and then I could pop up and get the door, and there'd be a guy there. He says, "Hi, is the roommate, is the roommate here, the girl's roommate?" And I said, "Sure, I think she is." And I call her, and he would come in and sit on the couch with us, and then she would come out. She'd be doing her hair or like doing something or making toast, or I don't even know. And so then he would kind of try to talk to her, and then the door would knock again, and the guy would get up from the couch, and at the door would be another guy, and it was some
Oh,
kind of like courting ritual. I was like, this is not how they do things. It took me a while for it to sink in, but I was like, this is
oh
not how it works in
boy.
California. You ask somebody
No.
out for dinner, or like, do you want to go get coffee or something like that? But that was
Especially a one-on-one. That's awkward. They're all sitting there lined up.
yeah, no, it was a trip. And so like we were just like, Gentiles or whatever we get called, I think. So
Oh, that's
it was just
funny.
a funny thing. Like it was a real expose. And I think the girl they were there to see was affiliated with church hierarchy. Like she was like, her dad was a big wig,
Oh,
like business guy or something like that in the Mormon church. So
they had
it's
to
kind of,
earn it.
they did. The men had to earn it. So I think
That's
it was,
funny.
and they usually showed up very formal dressed too, like at the middle
Oh,
of the
wow.
day, no shorts, so like long slacks and leather shoes,
Oh,
properly well
wow.
dressed, very clean cut,
Some
like
penny
Mormons.
loafers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was weird. It was weird. That's kind of my Mormon story. And then I was also like
Ah.
walking around the school campus at Brigham Young, and I was just like you just walk where you want back in my days, but everybody didn't walk on the grass. They always
Oh,
they stayed
yep.
they stayed on the and it took me a bit to notice it, but they stayed on the walkways and everything. It was super like they were super obedient or
Regimented.
something like that.
Oh,
Regimented,
yes.
yeah.
Obedient to a fault, I'd say, for most of us. Those of us that weren't challenge the system were always in trouble.
Yeah.
Like I
I
used
mean,
to
that's
do to my grandpa funny stories like, hey, would you rather me marry this guy that's a complete heathen? And he comes from a Mormon family, but he's not Mormon and he's just terrible. Like he's a bad guy, beats his wife, whatever that's going to be his wife. Or a really good black missionary. And he's like, get out of here with your dumb question. Like they don't like stuff like that,
no,
and
like
I
that,
used to
right?
do
And
it
it's
on purpose.
becoming more diverse. Like the Mormon Church has like a lot of
Yes.
Pacific Islanders. I think the congressman from Utah is black,
Yeah.
African
Yeah.
American. I forgot his name.
It's
Um,
completely different now.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's even one of the apostles is African. They have a German guy, I think an African
Yep.
American guy.
Yeah.
So
It's
it's,
gotten
it's
really expanded, but you always know in the back of your mind, like even like, well, I can't say for now, but in the past when I was growing up, they were like, oh, sure, black people, yep, they can come, everything's fine now, past the 60s. And then you kind of knew that you just didn't date outside your race. You were kind of told. And my brother did. He got married outside his race. He married a gal from Chicago and she's very black. And everyone assumed it would be me because I was the rebel.
you're the rebel, right?
And I didn't care. I dated whoever, but like I said, I got married so young I didn't even have a chance to get out in the world. So I got married quick and he got married later and they all were like kind of a little weird about it. I mean, they were nice, but
Is
there
he
was an
still married to the
undertone.
same woman?
They're passed away now,
Oh,
both
sorry,
of them,
yeah, sorry.
unfortunately. No, it's okay. It's been years. It's why I work mental health. I'm very open and honest about it. My brother died of an accidental overdose. So
Oh,
when
sorry,
that
yeah.
occurred, that's okay. I made it. The reason why my podcast is called Unfiltered is because oftentimes I am. And rise is rise above your situation. I had a really hard life as a kid. I was a ward of the court by 12. My brother passed away just a few years ago. I have an estrangement with my daughter that because of her husband. It's just a lot. There's many things. I've had cancer, whatever. And I always tell people, listen, you are what you decide you are. Like it doesn't matter about this other stuff, like you go change it. So when my brother passed, I decided, okay, I couldn't help him in the way I had hoped. So now I'm a mental health nurse and I do help people like him because you can do things like that. I'm not saying you don't have hard days, but like you can change your stars. You really can,
I think so. I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's tough.
It
And
doesn't.
like the inside world of Mormonism might maybe as clean and well ironed as it really is. There's
Oh,
drug abuse
no.
and there's just
There's a lot of drug abuse. I think we're one of the top states for mental health medications and different overdoses and stuff because everybody's depressed. I know when I was in the church, like you didn't dare say, like, you are one of God's chosen people. How dare you not be happy? Like you're
right.
a Debbie Downer.
Right, I've
And
heard that.
it was weird. Yeah, because I had a daughter that had clinical depression, and I very much was not understanding and not a good person to her when she was like that because I was still really indoctrinated. And now that I've gotten out of it, and she's a grown up now, she's 23, and oh no, she's 24 now. I always tell her, man, I am so sorry for how I handled that. And she's so wonderful. And she always says, Mom, I wouldn't choose any other mom. You're so different now. I love who you've become, like you said about your friend that changed completely till the death, that's kind of how I have been. Like, it's weird
But
once
it's
you get
almost
that.
like there's a lot of face in Mormonism, right?
Yes.
Like you
You can't
present
have a dirty
prosperity,
house.
you're a happy
Yep.
family, your kids are perfect. The
Yep.
wife gets up, puts her makeup on right
Oh, yeah.
away,
Yep.
that kind of
No
thing. Like,
tattoos, but you can have a boob job. Like, right?
interesting.
I don't
Yeah,
care what
it's
anyone does, but people do in Mormonism. I mean, you want your kids and so much pressure on the mom because I still worked. I was a full-time nurse and I worked on top of having these kids, on top of all my callings, like you were talking about. They just keep you so busy and you don't even have time to breathe. I always tell people I was never fatter, more miserable, or sicker in my life than when I was a Mormon. Like, and I know that sounds horrible, but that's just how it is,
one
like
of the interesting things I remember from BYU is after getting looked at for walking on the grass, I went into the student center and it was the longest candy bar I had ever seen in my life. It
yep.
literally was like 40 feet of like a candy shop. I'm not exaggerating. I was like,
No.
wow, this is
No.
like Willy Wonka. So I guess if you're not drinking, you're
Uh,
gorging on
you're
sugar, maybe.
eating.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Or you have your
Well,
repressed
and
or something. I
there's
don't
a
know.
big joke, like they say, so how do you tell the difference between a good Mormon and a bad Mormon?
How?
By the temperature of their caffeine, because they still drink a ton of Coke.
Still drinking. Interesting.
They're
Oh,
all got these
interesting.
big like gulp drinks and it's Diet Coke every time. And, you know,
Interesting.
uh,
So you
I,
no coffee culture,
yeah,
but a lot of other, yeah, they
no
kind of,
coffee, no coffee or tea. They say back in the day it was actually no hot drinks, which I find ironic because it came from that, but yet they publish and make their own hot cocoa, which, if you know anything about caffeine content plus sugar content, cocoa is a really up there with the coffee, on caffeine content. It's not caffeine that they discourage because they make their own brand of it for their social services program. And it's labeled with their label Deseret. They are also owners of Coke, which has lots of caffeine in it and sugar
sure.
too. So, I
Wow.
mean, it's a misconstruction on a lot of people. Oh, they don't drink caffeine. I'm like, oh, they drink a lot of caffeine. They just get it a
Interesting.
different way,
Yeah,
and they
it's
won't
different.
take drugs, but they will take drugs from the doctor.
Right. So they'll take a lot of
Yeah.
antidepressants or whatever,
Yes.
as long as
Xanax,
it's
all that
yeah.
stuff. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Yes. And you almost feel like, yeah, like you said, you have to be perfect. You have to get things done. Like all the women are either on diet pills or trying to zone out. It's like one or the other. Like, I don't want to do
Right.
anything and I just want to go to bed, or I want to do everything and I'm like Martha Mormon and I have to do it all.
Right. It's
And I'm
almost like
like,
Stepford
oh,
Wife. I'm not saying that you're that
yes. No,
extreme,
it's
but there's
true.
a kind of an element of
I
like you got
lived
to be
it. I
perfect.
get
Like
it.
you got to live.
Yeah.
It's an
Well, because
internal pressure.
you never know when the bishop might knock on your door for a visit. You better have that house clean all the time.
Wow.
It's just, and no one will say anything, but then later they gossip. I don't know that I've ever met a worse gossip in my life than Mormons. And
Wow.
they do that behind, instead of them just being off the cuff and being like, you know what, your house kind of messy, Linda, they'll just chat about everybody, and then they keep forcing these. They don't force it, but they keep saying to these women, we know you have 7 kids, but your babies in heaven want to come down. You're in this premortal existence and you're responsible for bringing these lives down. You better have another one. And these women would have baby after baby after baby. And you could tell that they couldn't even clothe them correctly. And the church would step in and help with food, but you can see that they're not quite managing. And yet the next year, there would be another baby,
Number 8. Wow. Yeah, it's wild. It's
Uh,
really wild.
yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
really like a baby producer, like
Oh,
culture there.
definitely.
It's really something else. I mean,
We
that's
have to
for people who
bring
don't
down the
know.
ghost babies. Yeah.
Right. So there's a premortal existence. That's why certain people are white or black or
Mhm.
tall or small, is because of your work for the Lord in the pre-existence. So you're working off that benefit, and then you're still trying to It's
Yeah.
kind of works-based. You're still doing a good
Oh,
job on
it's
earth
very
to get even
works-based.
better in the next life, right? And the
Yes.
interesting thing a lot of people don't know about Mormonism is its kind of reincarnation philosophy. Really
Yes.
does key into, I can't remember the scripture, but you all shine on like the sun, the moon, and the stars from Paul. And I think that Joseph
Mhm.
Smith keyed into that and made a whole series of doctrines. Another thing people don't know
Yes.
is that Smith would have, like, you talk about this revelation of like, okay, we can now have black people into the church. Smith
Mhm.
was doing that. So he would have these I think he has like 150 revelations in the Doctrines and
Yes.
Covenants.
Mhm.
And so, like, okay, what are we going to do? Oh, let me just go in. It's so,
Let me go tap into God and figure
that's
it out. And it's really magical based. Like I'm telling you, when you're 13 or 14, you get these patriarchal blessings and you get them from the patriarch of the church, and they lay their hands on your head and they tell you about your future. They give you a future telling reading. Like if you are good and faithful, you will be this and you will do that and you will have this and you will have that. And a lot of people, including his own son, had that blessing, which was what made a rift in the church because they said he was to be the next prophet. Joseph Smith, so Junior's son, so it would be Joseph Smith the third is his son. And he said, yeah, he should be the prophet. Well, Brigham Young came in and said, no, 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 no. He's not the prophet. I was supposed to be the prophet. And then all these other people started saying they were having visions, like Oliver Cowdery, his cousin, and all these different people. And so he started excommunicating them. And he's like, nobody can have the visions but me.
right. Right. I mean, it's very convenient, right? Like there's a
Right.
lot
He
of
needs
convenient
all,
visions,
all
and
of that.
that's the interesting thing. That's how imaginative Smith was, and how that kind of received things are still coming from Mormonism. I did the Lori Vallow I was telling you about, but like
Oh,
sometimes
yes.
it gets strange. How accurate was your patriarchal blessing?
No, mine was totally the only part I ever hung to because I really had a hard time getting pregnant was it said I would bear children. So I always was like, okay, I'm going to have a kid somehow. And I did. But it scared me at the time because you have to understand our culture here is if you're 19 and not married and you don't start having babies in your 20s, you are an old maid or
Right.
something is wrong,
Right.
clearly wrong with you. Like
Right.
if you don't have a baby within 2 years of getting married, people are very concerned for you. Very concerned. They're like, so when are you going to have a baby? I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And
Yeah, the
you're
pressure's on, man.
19.
Mormon pressure is
Yeah.
really different
Oh.
than everything else. I think that the theme now is like wait, like grow up and go
Mhm.
to college and
Yeah.
stuff.
Well,
Seems
they've
to
had
be a
too many
model.
divorces. They're one of the highest divorce rate capitas now because everybody wants to get married so they can have sex, i.e., 17. Because you don't want to go to hell, you know?
Right.
You're
Right.
like, "Oh my gosh, I can't do these things with you because I can't do that until I'm married." So, and I know
Right.
Catholics do that too, but it's a different kind of pressure. This is like serious. This is like you're going to shame your whole entire family and it's just so bad.
You have
And
a
you know what they
responsibility. You have a
do you know what they
responsibility in the
tell
spirit
us?
world. No.
They tell us that sexual sin, including masturbation, is next to murder, and they tell that to 12-year-olds. And if you want to know how bad that messes your brain up as a child, you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go to hell. Like,
I'm gonna go
what?
to hell.
Yeah. And they don't say hell, but the only people
They
that
imply
go
it or
to,
something. Yeah.
yeah, because Mormon hell is a little different. I always say Mormons are one uppers. Like they can't just have one heaven, they have to have three. They can't just have one hell, they have to have another thing. So they have outer darkness, which is for murderers and apostates that talk about it after after they leave the church. Thank heavens I believe in real Christ and grace. I don't buy that I'm going to outer darkness. But it's a cutoff of everything. So you are no longer in the Father's spirit or in his presence or in anyone's presence or anything's presence. You're just out there. And so that is what outer darkness is. And then there's the telestial kingdom where they say if you were an alcoholic, there's a drink and you can get it, but you can't drink it. And it just like punishes you for eternity like this, right? Like your sins. And then so the next level up's a little better than that, but you can't go be with your family. They can come down and visit you, but you can't go up there and see them. And then the top glory is the celestial glory, which is where God lives and you can go be with God. But the funny thing to me is people don't ever look at this and say, okay, Joseph Smith's whole ideology was, you are not a servant to the Lord. You are also not after death on his level anymore if you make it the whole way, right? You are now a god as he is a god, and you can own your planet like he has a planet, because once upon a time, God was a person just like you. And they also believe that Mary was impregnated by sex, like real.
Right. Like God
Yeah.
came down and they did the
Mhm.
deed. Yeah.
The
Yeah, I've heard
deed. Yep. They say careful. They say he was created as any man was created, right? Like,
and that's kind of the
and
Swedenborgian thing, is that in
this is
heaven,
so
I
interesting.
think
I
they,
don't know about this guy. I'm writing this down.
yeah, Swedenborg, he kind of had these visions later in life. He had a very conventional life. I think he was in Sweden and worked for the king in some facility. And then he started having these crazy visions and was like Smith or William Blake, right? Started having
Yes.
these incredibly vivid, imaginative visions. But in Swedenborg's world, heaven is like this place where there's tons of people and people are having sexual intercourse and living normal lives and eating.
Oh yeah. We can
Yeah,
have
so
sex. Yeah.
right.
In
And so
heaven.
and so I think that's how I think the Mormons distinguish an angel from a spirit, is the angel has a resurrected body, right? I think that's the
Yeah.
consistent
You
with
can shake their
true.
hand and feel that they are real.
They're
Yes.
real, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
I
like
think that
the
that's
big.
consistent with the view of Jesus of Nazareth. Is like you get a resurrect, like you have to be transformed, like Moses was transformed before God to see him, or else he would be burned to ash or something like that. So
So wild. It's like,
it's a, I mean, but I think that he was exposed to Swedenborgism, and that might have been how he had that's like the cultural outgrowth of Mormonism is like Swedenborg, where you're encouraged to have tons of kids, and this is the way life is, and that's what he had. Like Joseph Smith, how many kids he had? 15, 17? I don't know.
I think he had 11, but only five
Five
survived
made it,
out
right?
of.
So,
So, but then he also had the twins that they adopted. So that
right,
would,
or
I don't know if
something
that
like
counts
that. I
into it.
vaguely remember that.
Yeah. Yeah. They
Um,
actually acquired them the same night their twins died, because this other guy had twins and his wife died in childbirth. So he was kind of like, here you go. I don't know what to do. Like, I got these babies. And so,
right.
yeah, they gave them to
Yeah,
him.
yeah. The doctrines are really right, and you're of the stick of a frame, right? So the way that it's counterpoised to Judaism, like Judah has this Bible, and then this is Ephraim's thing too, right?
Well, and I
Like
see
that's the
so much of
original
the
Israel tribe.
Kabbalah too. Like when you talk about Jewish stuff, like if you've ever seen Jewish mysticism stuff in the Kabbalah, it goes right along with a lot of this too. Like
Interesting,
it's almost like he combined some things and just went, okay, this is good. This is what we're doing.
right?
And
And my
I
understanding
don't
too is the
know.
whole apostate thing isn't part of the original primordial church. It came later because people were
Hmm.
leaving. So it was like, we got to keep these people in line. If you're an apostate, man, you're going straight down to the very bottom. Or
Got to
something
go
like
with the
that.
murders. You're
Yeah,
just
you got to
speaking
go. You're a
out.
murderer.
Yep.
Yeah, you're speaking out, or you're not on board if you leave Mormonism. And that's very common in a lot of Christians, even cults or anything, but Christian sects too. Is like, if you leave,
Yep.
man,
That's it. Well, my
and you,
family, they'll turn around and say, well, oh, we don't judge or this or that. But then you'll see it with many people, like they'll slowly withdraw away from you, or they'll do a cutoff. Like my family did a full cutoff, but
right.
my
That's
grandma
the way it
had
is in Seventh
started.
Day Adventist. Like I've talked to a lot of those people, Seventh Day Adventist and Jehovah's Witnesses, and also the elitism. So Mormons are the elite. Like we are
Yes.
the
They
top,
are
but
the
they
top of the
also
top.
have that. Yeah, they have that same position in Jehovah's Witnesses. Like we're in the top. We got to get into the top 144. That's why they're out there,
Right.
talking all the time. And same with like Seventh Day Adventists. We have the right view. You guys worship on the wrong day, and that sets us apart. It makes us better than you.
Yeah, we know
We
way
really
more than
don't.
you.
Yeah, exactly. We really don't look down to you,
Ah,
but we really do look down on you.
yeah,
You're
but
absolutely
actually, you don't know what you're talking about because you
right.
don't have the
Exactly.
special undies.
There you
Yeah.
go. You don't have the
So
special Masonic inspired. And in the temples are beautiful. Like I
they are.
went to school in Northern California. There was a really nice one on a bluff in Oakland that I would see.
They
You'd see it
spare
on the
no
freeway.
expense. Yeah, they
Pardon me?
spare no expense. They spare no expense at all.
But
Yeah.
those grips are done. Like you're supposed to be having a grip
Yes.
with God or an angel or something through
Yes, it's a veil, it's a
veil.
curtain. So they say it's angels and sentinels. These are what you have to pass the angels and sentinels, and these are the tokens and signs. Now, that doesn't even sound biblical, okay? Tokens to me and signs sounds very Masonic. We're back to the Masons. And even the cuts in the curtain, because it's like this fancy silk curtain, is Masonic. It's the compass and the square. So the slits are like that, and the
Oh
other
wow,
one's
so they're
like this.
designed like that. Interesting.
And so the interesting thing is we get new underwear, so do the Masons. We get initiatory, so do the Masons. They changed that. And if this is God's divine knowledge to us, right? Like we were talking about before, it's a prophecy down to the head of the church, to the prophet. Now, if he's never wrong, which they say he isn't, how come they're changing them? They're changing them because when I went through, you had to get naked and you got a little poncho and you put your head through it. And I mean, like a serape, one that you get in Mexico that has fully open sides and you're just naked underneath. And then a woman came in and she's like, "Oh, I'm here to do your blessing." And I was so indoctrinated. The only thing I had to say about any of this, which is ridiculous now that I know this, was, "Where's the guy?" And she said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "You can't give me a blessing. You don't have the priesthood." And she said, "Everything's different in the temple." And I said, "You're not a man." And she's like, "You're not dressed." And I'm like, "I think I'd rather have the man." Like I was so I was so indoctrinated that I was like, this isn't right, And looking back on that, I'm like, I was literally so indoctrinated. I was comfortable with a man that I didn't know coming in and seeing me naked. Like, I mean, you don't take the thing off, but you can see, and they don't touch you sexually. Lots of people go into this weird. And I just say, you know what? Mormonism is weird enough on its own. You don't need to make it weird. It's weird enough just by itself. You don't have to sensationalize anything. They bless your sinews. That might sound familiar. And, all these little blessings, like right here, like above your navel. They're not touching you in a sexual creepy way. I mean, it's creepy, but it's it's no different than a doctor.
Be a temple, like it's a lot of retirees, like it's an honorable tradition to be a temple. What are they called? Servant, temple servant, or
a missionary? They call them a temple missionary. Yep. And any of those positions are really well up there. But when you go through and you do this, the first time you go through for yourself, you take out your like a Masonic rite. Okay. It's like multiple hours. You're in there with this garden story and Eden, and you get the signs and the tokens and the initiatory and all the stuff and the new underwear. And it's a whole big thing. And you get to where you go through the veil, through the temple, in the veil to the celestial room, which is like fake heaven. Well, your husband goes through first, and he got his new name. His new name is to be revealed to no one except for to God when he dies, and to this guy for the first time, because he's pretending to be God, to let him into to heaven.
Wow, that's really
and so he tells the guy his name, but he never tells me. And guess who I tell my name? I don't tell my name to God. I tell my name to my husband. Because he is my God, because he owns the priesthood in our marriage. And without that, I cannot go to heaven. And they used to say that unmarried women wouldn't go to heaven, but now they don't anymore. And so the next time you go through, you do this, you get done with all that and you go home, but you come back a lot. And the next time you go through for dead people. And they give you a name of a dead person when you get there. And they've even done Hitler. They've done Jews that died. Wow. Yeah. I have the date and everything. It was December something. But it's wild. And when they started doing like Anne Frank and the Jews that died in the Holocaust, that was it. The Jewish church was so upset. They were like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing?" Like, as they should be. I mean, these people died, for what they believed. And so it was bad. They made an agreement.
But isn't there like a special relationship between Mormons and Jews? Like they'll go to each other's
They do go to each other's
Passover
aid.
or whatever. Like
Yes.
there's because it's like they share persecution
Yes.
experiences.
Yep. And they support each other, but they were like, please stop doing this. And it's funny, they've done all the famous people like Marilyn Monroe and Elvis and all these people. And they say that you still have free choice to take it or not. Once you get to heaven, you can say yes or no. Not heaven. You're in a waiting room, like basically. And you're waiting for these things to be done so you can go forward. Well, the thing is it's a kind of a violation, but also it goes back to that whole saying of Abraxas, who was a necromancer. And we are always delving into this stuff for dead people. And then the dead thing with his brother and all this weird stuff. And I'm like, I often wonder what God they're praying to. You know, their Jesus is
Maybe
white
that's
and
like the
delights them.
family psychology is like they had a dead older brother who should have been the leader. And then what is his role in the
Right.
afterlife or whatever? So then they focused on it and made up some or whatever. There was
Something.
a revelation that we have to baptize the dead because
Well, and
if
I
they
think
didn't get
that
baptized,
does. I think you're correct, not just the brother, but all the children he had that died.
they
I think
died.
that was maybe the token to Emma to say, you will be, because when people lose people in that church, they say, you will be with them again. They will be, you're sealed. When you get married in the temple, you get married for time and all
That's
eternity. That
right.
is not biblical. What does the Bible say? There is no male nor female. There is none of that, you know?
No giving in
So
marriage. Yeah. None of that.
yeah, it's very strange to me. I'm like, that's very odd that they would still continue with that, even though they know, they absolutely know that that's not biblical. But when I first got out and I learned about some of these things and about grace, because see, here I am, uh, side by side with this man for eternity that took off on me. By the way, he took off with a polygamous girl, which was great. No, that wasn't great. She was already married and she was the third wife of a polygamist. They don't share, like the women don't get to do that, but she somehow did. And I was out of luck with some kids. And I thought, you got to be kidding. I can't be stuck with this guy for time and all eternity,
Eternity.
And I went to the church and asked for divorce. And they said, not until you get another husband to take his place. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, and there's very interesting things about that as well. That ritual, when you get married, you kneel over an altar and you're wearing that outfit. You're not wearing wedding clothes. You're wearing that outfit with the apron that I showed you.
Like you're
And
totally like in a
yeah,
white thing, right? Like
yeah, white, and then the green apron, and then you're holding hands across an altar and you're looking into, the forever mirrors that they use in witchcraft, like that
oh,
go on
really?
for,
Wow. You have a mirror?
yes.
Wow.
Yep, 2 mirrors that face each other, so it looks like a tunnel forever, like you see
Wow.
down. And
Wow.
they
That's
say that
intense.
invokes spirits. Yeah,
Yeah.
and luckily, I mean, I'm out and I sure did a lot of repenting and just a lot of protection because I don't want any of that. I don't
What
want
would you
any
recommend to
of that.
somebody in your situation? Like I had, have you heard of Diana Cannon Ragsdale?
No,
She
no.
wrote a book,
Mm-mm.
maybe should be a good guess for you. It's Loose
Oh,
Cannons, a
great.
memoir of mania and mayhem in a Mormon family. But
Okay. I'm writing
I
this
think
down.
she's kind of the same where she's like, I've had enough of this. And it's
Yeah.
very it's like phallocentric. It's very male. Mormonism is like,
Yes.
I think maybe
You
it's
can't go to
pushed,
heaven. Yeah, without your
right, like
husband.
without your man.
Yep.
So you better do what you're told and
Yep.
stay in
You're
line.
right.
It seems like the Christianity of my era is much more lenient. I mean, I
I
belong
get what
into,
you're saying.
well, I'm
Yeah,
just
they're
saying that
very
they're more
structured.
involved in women in leadership roles. Like they're not all homemakers or baking or something at church. Like
No.
there's ministries with women in them. I'm supposedly going to hell because I'm part of a Presbyterian denomination
Oh,
that
no.
ordains women. So I'm going to hell
Oh,
too. I really never
well,
even thought about it. I was just like, if she wants to
yeah,
do the
they can do a
job,
good job. Yeah.
I mean, maybe
Yeah, whatever.
maybe more empathetic. I don't know. Maybe female traits in this job would be good in certain ways. I mean, I
Right.
don't know. It's not biblical, but it is
Well,
interesting, kind of, in my kind of view of the Christianity. Like the women is not,
left down a notch, right?
yeah,
Like put
yeah.
down a notch. And I was always like okay about it, but I knew it existed. Like people would say, "Oh, is it because you're a feminist?" I'm like, "I'm not really. I'm an equalist. Like I think all races, colors, sex, everything should just be on an equal playing field for me. I don't really care. But
I'm
I
like
know
a
many
freedomist. Like,
women.
if you want to
Yeah,
do it, then you should
do
try it.
it.
And
Go
maybe it's your
do it.
calling. If it's your
Yeah.
calling, do it. Whether you're a
Yeah.
woman and female, if you want to be a homemaker or a home mom, traditional wife,
Do
do
that.
it. If you want to
Yeah.
be a feminist, do it. If you want to be a hybrid, do that.
Yeah. Yep.
Why you define yourself? You don't have to be put into
That
some kind of
you
place
define yourself.
and then zapped
That.
like mind control. If you don't do this, have 18 kids and you're going to go to hell. Like
Well, you're not
that
bringing
doesn't seem
down your babies right. Dang it.
right. No.
When I
Like, what
found
would you
out
recommend
about
to somebody in
Grace,
your position? What would you recommend
yeah,
to somebody who wanted to get out? Or
I tell people this, and this is what I do now. Is I really, when I started getting out, I started just delving into the Bible, just the scriptures, and I still include the Apocrypha because I still read everything. And even later in your journey, it's good to know a lot, like how you've learned a lot about occult stuff and things. Not for everyone, but for many of us, that's important so that we can identify things to show other people. If your brain isn't in that and you don't feel safe, obviously don't do that. But go down into the Bible and just study. I studied it every day for 2 years and journaled and just really put my heart in it. And also, I listened to a ton of Derek Prince. I love Derek Prince. He's passed away now, so no one can really say anything too bad because he's gone. You can say what you want of him, I guess, but he has some good content for the heart and for, he's, I think, Pentecostal, but I am of no denomination. Fool me once, right? I'm okay with the Bible and God and make a real relationship of it. Like, there's so much. I don't think I ever read the Bible as a Mormon at all because they say, oh, the Bible's only correct in as much as it's translated, which isn't correct. So you never do. You just don't really care. You spend all your time in the Book of Mormon. And I didn't really feel anything about the Book of Mormon. Like, I did it because you're supposed to do it. And so I did. But I never really felt inspired like I do with the Bible. Like, sometimes I'll open it to the same verse I've read 1,000 times and I'll learn something else because it's the living word. And as you grow and change, that verse may apply to you another way the next time you read it because you might be having a different kind of problem. And that's why I think it's really important people really have a working relationship with God. And however you need to find that, I mean, definitely the Bible is the first place you go. As for sermons, I love John Ramirez, Derek Prince, some of these people, but they can be controversial. I get that. Take what you need out of it. Quit being so. My number one thing for people in general, it says we are not to be easily offended. So don't be.
Yeah, don't be part of this woke, sensitive,
Yeah.
thin-skinned culture. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. And it's illogical to think if somebody's doctrines or opinion on one subject matter is wrong, it negates the whole apple cart.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
Yeah, it's silly. There's so many good sermons out there on YouTube now. And remember one other thing. When Christ spoke, he spoke on top of mounts with lots and lots of people. He didn't go in a church. He actually didn't like that. What did he call them? Pharisees. Like, he didn't like the religious people. He hung out with riffraff. Now, is that how they stayed? No, you have to evolve. I'm not saying you can't be around people that are in a different type of thing than you, but ultimately, you don't want to be a sinner if you walk with sinners, right? You want to be the person that maybe helps inspire them or helps change their life in a positive way or whatever. But you don't have to bring yourself down a notch. You don't have to bring yourself above them either. Like, I'm over that too. Like, that hierarchy thing that I did as a Mormon, I don't like that. It made me not be very heartfelt for people, and just be truthful to yourself.
The real
right?
Bible is like you're a servant, like according to Christ, you
Yeah.
serve. And if you feed people, you're feeding him. So the doctrines are sometimes they get watered down,
I
or
feel that.
the values of like what Christ is saying get subsumed underneath denominational
Yes.
ideology and stuff like that. It's too bad.
Well,
That's why I agree
it's
with
about
you.
control,
Read the Bible.
right? Like, 2 or more in his name is church. We're having church right now. We're
I think
speaking
so.
about God. Yeah. And I'm not saying that that's now some people really need that fellowship. I'm not discouraging that for them. They might have little kids that need that. They might have, for me, this is what I have to do because try and find few churches out here that aren't Mormon that you feel really comfy in. Like they're few and far between, and it's just not, there's not much to choose from. And honestly, like we've just kind of gone into ourselves for that piece, not for everything else. We still talk to our Mormon. I love my Mormon neighbors. His family's all Mormon still. We never speak of this with them. I know they know I have this podcast. I would never recommend it. I don't put it on my private Facebook page. I don't talk to any person about my podcast that is active LDS. If they ask me because they heard like at work, they'll say, "Oh, I heard you have a podcast. What's the name of it?" And I'll say, "Are you LDS?" Out of respect, I really don't think you should listen to it if you are, because I'm not trying to hurt anybody, and I'm not trying to force them into a situation like I was, where it was extremely uncomfortable when I came out.
It's a hard
yeah,
decision. I bet
yeah,
there's a lot of people like you who won't come out of it for a wide variety of reasons,
family.
family reasons, sons, daughters, their culture, you know,
Yep.
they just go through it. That's it.
I lost almost everything. I got my child taken from me because my grandma called CPS, and literally they dropped the case, but they also told me one thing: your daughter's 17 and a half, let go. I recommend, because if you don't and she runs away, then you're going to be responsible for money and this and that. And she was really close by, but I'll tell you that rift, whatever happened that year, was her senior year. Our relationship did recover, but it never recovered fully. And when she met her husband, the same thing happened again. She just moved away, like she didn't want to deal with anybody anymore. She was just done. And I was just I mean, I think that at that point in my life was the closest I ever wanted to die. I didn't want to kill myself. I didn't want to do anything bad. I just didn't want to live. It was so sad.
Yeah.
And God helped me through it. Like this podcast came as a part of all that study. I just absorbed myself into God and the Bible and everything, because it was the only thing that could get me through it. And when I started coming out the other end, I was like, well, I see things different now. Even though I'd been born again for a long time, at that point, I didn't focus on it, because that daughter, to me, everybody used to tease me, she's your favorite. She's just my oldest, and she's just a lot like me, and we used to hang out a lot. I don't know that I could have grown into who I am with her right there. Like how God says he takes things sometimes that we idolize. And I often wonder if that was my problem. Like, oh man, I hope she can come back someday. Like the prodigal son, I would never require anything. I'd just be thrilled and have a party. It's been almost 5 years, so it's been really hard.
I'm
But
sorry to hear that, man.
yeah, it's okay. Like I said, everything that happens bad to us, and I've had a lot, more than most people's fair share. But guess what? It's all what you do with it. And I'm not just saying like, oh, I was happy every day and smiling like I am right now. Like, no, I cried a million tears, and I was sad and despondent and depressed. But you don't want to live there. You have to go through it. You have to come out the other end. So
Amen.
that's my
Amen.
advice. Yeah, that's my
Yeah, it's
advice
good.
for people.
I gotta run. I gotta
All
go.
right. Well, it has been my
Yeah.
just absolute pleasure to speak with you. I appreciate you so much.
It's great
And
to
if
talk
you
with you.
ever want
Thanks
to
for the
come
invite.
back, yeah, I would
Well,
love
you
that.
never know. There's always something else to talk about. We didn't
Right.
even cover any of my books or anything like that. So I'm
Yeah, I
sure if
would
you
love
want
to
to
do
cover
that.
those,
Oh my
we can do
gosh, I
that.
would love to. Yeah,
There's a
that would
lot.
be amazing.
All right, keep
I
in
would
touch.
love
Can you
that.
send me the audio tonight?
Absolutely. I
I'd
will.
like to
All
repost
right.
it. Okay,
Thank
cool.
you. Of course.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Babe.